Get ready to shape some hot metal. First, wait for the ingot to heat up to just the right temperature. Then, carefully place it on the anvil. Now it's time to grab your hammer and give it a strong swing. But when I tried making one-handed longswords, nothing seemed to turn out as good as the one I made earlier in the summer. This was weird. It made me feel both frustrated and happy at the same time. I thought about the special sword I had made with all my heart and soul. It was probably being used on the battlefield right now, slicing through enemies with ease. Sometimes I got to put this special tool to the test and really use it. What was weird is that it didn't get worn out like normal things do. Instead, it started to look almost see-through. It made me wonder if it wouldn't just get weaker and weaker, but actually break into pieces like a crystal when it finally gave out. Luckily, that wasn't something I had to worry about anytime soon. We had finally made it to the 75th floor, the current frontier. Now it was time to make a new sword for Kirito, one that would stay by his side for a long time. As I worked, I didn't even notice I'd reached the right number of strokes until the metal ingot started glowing red and changing shape. I held my breath as I watched the transformation happen. Then I carefully picked up the brand new sword to check it out. Not bad, I said to myself, trying to sound cool. I put the sword down on the work table, feeling pretty proud of my handiwork. It's time to get crafty. I need to find the perfect ingot to make an awesome two-handed axe that will let me reach my enemies from far away. After finishing all my orders, I stood up and stretched. I was feeling a bit tired, so I rolled my head around and let out a big yawn. As I looked around, I noticed a small photo on the wall that caught my eye. It was a picture of me and my friends having a blast. In the photo, Asuna and I were standing side by side, giving peace signs with our hands. And just behind us, Kirito was smiling in his own special way. A bit awkwardly, but it suited him perfectly. Seeing that happy moment made me smile too. I still remember the day we took this photo right outside that store. It was about 2 weeks ago when they finally told me they were getting married. You could tell they were perfect for each other. But it took them a pretty long time, 6 whole months, to figure it out. To be honest, it was a bit frustrating watching them struggle to get their act together. I even had to step in and give them a nudge or two to help things move along. I still get super excited thinking about their special day. But if I'm being honest, it also makes me feel a little sad. That amazing night is stuck in my head and keeps popping up in my dreams. It was like a bright star in a pretty dull couple of years. Even now, 5 months later, it still feels warm and fuzzy inside. I looked at the photo and whispered to myself. Even though I didn't want to, my finger trailed over the picture, remembering that incredible night. I thought of myself as a no-nonsense kind of person, but it turns out I'm a total romantic at heart. As I said the words, "I've been in love with you ever since." I tapped the photo one last time and spun around. This all happened just as I was leaving the studio, trying to decide if I should grab a late lunch or head out to eat. Suddenly a super loud noise exploded above my head. It was like nothing I'd ever heard before. Imagine being jolted awake by a loud alarm bell. That's what happened to me. At first I thought it was coming from right above my head, but then I realized it was echoing down from the floor upstairs. I rushed outside to see what all the commotion was about. But what I found was even weirder than the alarm. My trusty NPC helper was gone. She was always at her desk helping me out every single day since I opened my store. Now her chair was empty. I stared at the spot where she usually sat, my eyes wide with surprise. But no matter how long I waited, she didn't come back. It was like she vanished into thin air. Something big was going on. As I tumbled out the front door, I stopped dead in my tracks. What caught my attention was insane. High above me on the floor that seemed like 1,000,000 feet up, something crazy was written on the ceiling. In huge red letters, 2 phrases kept repeating: "Warning" and "System Announcement." I stared up at it, my mind racing. Then it hit me: "System Announcement." I had seen this before and it wasn't good. I'll never forget that moment. It was like déjà vu, the same scene we'd all seen 2 years ago when our game turned into a matter of life and death. A huge avatar had displayed the rules that would change everything for 10,000 players. Now I stood frozen, staring at the warning again, but as I looked around I saw other players doing the same thing, their eyes wide with shock. Something didn't feel right. And then it hit me. The streets were empty. There weren't any non-player characters. NPCs walking around or selling stuff like they usually did. It was weird and eerie. Here's what happened next. My storekeeper vanished into thin air, and it seemed like everyone else did too. But why? Just as I was wondering, the loud alarm that had been blasting suddenly went silent. The quiet only lasted for a moment though. Then, a soft but clear voice spoke up. "This is an important message to all players," she said. It wasn't a real person's voice, it sounded like a computer. This was weird because usually, the game didn't have announcements like this. 2 years ago we'd heard from Akihiko Kaba, the creator of Sewo. But that was different. This time it was like the game itself was talking to us. And that had never happened before. I gulped and paid attention. The game was changing in a big way. From now on we're in forced management mode, the announcement said. No more monsters or items will appear, and all non-player characters will disappear. Everyone's health will be set to maximum. I wondered if something was wrong with the game. Was it a glitch? My heart started racing with worry. But then I heard the most amazing words. The game has been cleared as of 2:05 p.m. on November 7th, Aincrad time. The game was finally beaten. At first I just sat there, trying to wrap my head around what it all meant. It took me a few seconds to realize what was happening. I looked around and saw that everyone else was just as confused as I was. Their faces were stuck in shock. But then we all heard the words that changed everything. All players will now be logged out of the game. Please stop where you are. I repeat. Suddenly everyone around me exploded into cheers. The ground started shaking. And it wasn't just the ground, the whole castle of Aincrad was trembling. Players were hugging each other, rolling around on the floor, pumping their fists in the air, and screaming at the top of their lungs. But I just stood there frozen. I stood frozen in front of my store, unable to say a word. Then I slowly raised my hands to cover my mouth. It was him, Kirito. He's always been a little crazy, but this was insane. The front line of players had only made it to the 75th floor, and I knew that only Kirito would dare to try something so reckless and impossible. Suddenly I thought I heard a faint whisper in my ear. It sent shivers down my spine. You kept your promise. The voice seemed to say, yes, you finally did it. Tears of joy began to well up in my eyes. And before I knew it, they were streaming down my face. I just let the tears roll down my face. Then, I threw my arm up in the air and started jumping around like crazy. Hey! I yelled as loud as I could, using my hands to make a megaphone. I wanted Kirito to hear me all the way from where he was. Many floors above. Let's meet up again soon. Kirito, I love you. Miss? The Girl in the Morning Dew, 22nd floor of Aincrad. October 2024. As soon as alarm clock went off every morning. At exactly 7:50. It was 8,000 Armand. It had been 6 months since she fell head over heels in love with him. Now, she propped herself up on her elbows, rested her chin on her hands, and couldn't help but smile at Kirito's peaceful face. 2 weeks ago, everything changed for Asuna and Kirito. They became an unstoppable team, going on adventures together. And just 6 days ago, they took a huge leap. They got married and moved to the 22nd floor of this crazy forest. Asuna loved Kirito more than anyone else in the world, but there was still so much she didn't know about him. Even when he slept, his face was a mystery. The more she looked at him, the harder it was to guess how old he really was. Sometimes she thought of him as older, because he could be kinda quiet and weird. But one thing was for sure, she adored him. Imagine sleeping next to someone you love. Watching them dream with a peaceful smile on their face. That's what Asuna saw when she looked at her husband. He seemed like a little kid, innocent and carefree. She could easily ask him how old he was. But something held her back. Even though they were married in this virtual world, talking about real life felt off limits. It wasn't just about age. Asuna wanted to know his real name, and where he lived, so they could find each other when this crazy adventure ended. But whenever she thought about bringing it up, she got nervous. What if talking about the real world made their life together in the woods feel fake? This virtual world was all she had right now, and it felt more real to her than anything else. Asuna gazed at Kirito, feeling happy and sad at the same time. Even if they got stuck in this virtual world forever, she wouldn't mind as long as they were together until the very end. That's why she wanted to make this moment last a bit longer. She gently touched Kirito's cheek, and it made her smile. He looked so peaceful and young when he was sleeping. Asuna knew that even though he looked calm now, he was actually really strong and brave. Kirito had been playing the game since its beta test, which means he'd been practicing for a really long time. He'd fought in tons of battles and gotten super strong because of it, even though he lost to Heathcliff, the leader of the Knights of the Blood. Asuna knew that Kirito was still the best player in the game. She had no doubt about it, he was a total gaming master. As she looked at Kirito sleeping next to her, she felt a surge of protectiveness. She had fought battles with him before, and he was always brave. But now he seemed like a little brother who needed her help. She wanted to keep him safe from getting hurt. She gently wrapped her arms around him and whispered, "I love you, Kirito. Let's be together forever." Kirito slowly opened his eyes, looking up at her with a sleepy gaze. For a moment they just looked at each other, and she felt happy to have him by her side. Asuna's eyes locked onto Kirito's, and she let out a surprised, "Whoa!" She jumped back so fast that she had to catch herself by kneeling on the bed. Her face turned bright red. "Gee, good morning." "Kirito," she stuttered, "did you, hear that?" Kirito rubbed the sleep from his eyes and waved at her. "Morning? Hear what?" he asked, trying to hide a yawn. Asuna quickly shook her head. Nothing. Nothing." After they chowed down on a breakfast of scrambled eggs, black bread, salad and coffee. They cleaned up the table in no time, just 2 seconds. Asuna clapped her hands excitedly.
Okay.
"Where's our adventure taking us today?" Kirito made a face. "Can't you say it in a cooler way?"
Asuna just grinned.
"Every day with you is amazing." And she meant it. Things hadn't always been so great though. Thinking back, Asuna remembered how tough her life was when she first got trapped in the virtual game SAO. For a year and a half she felt empty inside. She even gave up sleep to focus on getting stronger and leveling up. But all of that changed when she met Kirito and fell for him. Imagine being so good at a game that you're almost unstoppable. That's exactly what happened with Asuna, a top player in the Knights of the Blood Guild. She blasted through the game's toughest mazes so fast that her teammates started to complain. For Asuna, nothing mattered except one thing: beating the game and getting out. She was on a mission. But sometimes she couldn't help thinking that her life would be very different if she had met a certain someone Kirito sooner. Who knows what would have happened? Maybe everything would have changed for her. As soon as she met him, everything changed. Her days became brighter and more exciting than she ever thought possible. Being with him made every moment feel special and worth remembering. For Asuna, the time they spent together was truly precious. Each second felt like a tiny sparkling treasure that she wanted to hold on to forever. Asuna crossed her arms and scowled. "You don't want to go on an adventure with me?" she asked. Kirito just smiled and pulled out his map. He made it visible so Asuna could see it too. The map showed all the forests and lakes on their floor. Kirito pointed to a spot on the map. "I was thinking we could check this out," he said. The spot he chose was a section of woods not too far from their home. Their floor was pretty big, about 8 kilometers across. That's because the whole world of Aincrad is shaped like an egg. And they were near the bottom. This meant they had plenty of room to explore. "Let's go have some fun," Kirito said, his eyes sparkling with excitement. Imagine a huge lake right in the middle of a giant floor. On one side of the lake was a village called Coral, where most people lived. On the other side was a maze-like place called the Labyrinth. The rest of the area was covered in tall green trees that smelled amazing. Asuna and Kirito's home was near the edge of the floor, close to the southern tip. One day Kirito pointed to a spot about 1.5 miles away from their home. "I heard something weird yesterday in the village," he said with a mysterious grin. Asuna looked at him curiously. "What is it?" she asked. Kirito's smile grew bigger. "There's a rumor about something spooky in the forest." Asuna's eyes widened. "A ghost," she whispered. She waited for Kirito to say more, but he just stayed quiet. Finally she asked, "What kind of ghost?" "You mean like a monster that can disappear and reappear?" "Are you talking about creepy game characters like ghosts or monsters?" "No, I'm talking about the real deal, a ghost that's supposed to be the spirit of a person, a little girl." The girl's face started twitching nervously. She knew she was more scared of ghost stories than most people. Just thinking about the super spooky castle mazes on floors 65 and 66 of the game made her shudder. She had even come up with excuses to avoid playing those levels with her friends. But this is just a game, right? It's all fake and digital, she stammered. Asuna tried to laugh it off. There's no way ghosts are real, she said, forcing a smile. But Kirito just teased her more. He knew she was scared of ghosts, and he couldn't resist making things worse. What if it's the spirit of someone who died playing the game? He said with a grin. Maybe they're stuck in their special headset and log in at night to haunt the virtual world. Asuna had had enough. Stop it, she cried out, laughing. Kirito just chuckled. Haha, sorry, he said, still smiling. Come on, that's just not fair. I'm not saying we'll actually find a ghost or anything. But if we're gonna go exploring, why not choose a spot that could be really cool? Asuna looked out the window, pouting. Although the weather was perfect for this time of year. Winter was just around the corner, but for now, the sun was shining brightly. It lit up the grass in the yard, making everything look warm and cozy. You might wonder why it looks so sunny all the time in Aincrad. The thing is, you never actually see the sun directly, only early in the morning, or at sunset. But the game's special lighting system makes sure everything is well lit during the day, so it always feels nice and bright. Asuna stood tall, her chin sticking out in a dare. Okay, fine, let's go on this wild goose chase, she said to her husband, but I'm only doing it to prove that ghosts aren't real. Her husband grinned mischievously. If we don't find anything today, we'll have to come back at night next time. Asuna's eyes widened in horror. No way, you're not getting me to do that. She crossed her arms, adding, and if you keep being stubborn, you're going to have to buy your own lunch. Her husband quickly backed down. Forget I said that, he muttered. Asuna gave him one last stern look before breaking into a smile. Come on, let's get moving. Hey, deal. If you cut the bread, I'll cook the fish, Kirito said with a grin. It was 9 o'clock and they were finally ready to head out. They had packed their favorite fish burgers in their lunch boxes, and were excited for the day ahead. As they stepped out onto the front lawn, Asuna turned to Kirito with a mischievous spark in her eye. Hey, can I ride on your back? She asked. Kirito's eyes widened in surprise. Ride on my back, he stuttered. Asuna just laughed. Come on, it's more fun to see things from a different view, she said, already climbing onto his back. Piece of cake, right? He said with a grin. I mean, you're super strong. Asuna looked unsure. Well, yeah, but you're kind of old for this, she stuttered. The guy laughed. Age doesn't matter. And who's gonna see us anyway? Asuna hesitated, then finally agreed. Okay, fine. He bent down, shaking his head in amusement. Asuna climbed onto his back, sitting on his head with one leg on each shoulder. Like this? She asked. Try to look back, and you'll get a slap, Asuna warned Kirito with a grin. Kirito stood up and Asuna was happy to see that she could look him straight in the eye. Almost. Whoa, we can see the lake from here already, Kirito exclaimed. But when he tried to turn around, Asuna stopped him. No way. Just keep moving, she said with a laugh. To get him going again, she put her hands on his head and shouted. March. Let's go north-northeast. Kirito started walking, and Asuna sat on his shoulders, feeling happy and carefree. She loved spending time with him, and this moment was especially special to her. She felt more alive than ever before. For 17 years she'd been going through the motions, but now everything seemed new and exciting. As they strolled down the path, Kirito leading the way, they walked for about 12 minutes. The scenery around them started to change, and soon they arrived at a beautiful lake on the 22nd floor. The sun was shining, and the air was calm, which probably explained why so many fishermen were already there, casting their lines into the water. It was a peaceful spot, perfect for a relaxing day outdoors. As we walked along the path that wound over the hills around the lake, we couldn't help but notice the fishermen on the shore to our left. They spotted us and started waving like crazy. They were all grinning from ear to ear, and some of them were even cracking up at the sight of us. One of my friends whispered, "You said nobody would see us." I just laughed and replied, "Guess I was wrong, they definitely saw us." "Come on," Kirito waved back. Someone said with a grin. But Kirito just grumbled no way. Even though he complained, he didn't try to put her down. It was pretty clear that he was having a blast, even if he didn't want to admit it. As they walked, the path started to wind its way down a hill, and into a dense forest. Towering pine trees surrounded them, their trunks as wide as houses and their branches stretching up towards the sky like giant arms. These trees looked just like Japanese cedars, with their dark green needles and sturdy limbs. Kirito and his friend walked quietly through the forest, taking in the sights and sounds of nature all around them. Imagine walking through a forest on a crisp fall day. The leaves crunch out under your feet, and the sound of a babbling brook fills the air. Birds chirp and tweet, adding to the symphony of sounds. It's super peaceful. Asuna looked up at the trees towering above her. "Wow, these trees are huge," she exclaimed. "Do you think we could climb them?" She turned to Kirito, who was thinking it over. He said, considering the idea. "Hey, I don't think there's anything stopping us from climbing those," he said with a grin. "Wanna give it a try?" But she shook her head. "Let's save that for our next adventure. We can make it the theme." She sat up straight on his shoulders and gazed out at the trees ahead, towards the edge of Aincrad. "Check it out," she said. "There are these pillar things all around the outside, stretching from the ground all the way up to the ceiling. Hey, what do you think is at the top? If we climb all the way up?" Someone asked. Kirito just shrugged and said, "I've already done it." The person's eyes widened in surprise. "What? You've climbed all the way to the top before?" They leaned in close to Kirito's face, curiosity getting the better of them. "Why didn't you ask me to come with you?" they asked, sounding a bit hurt. Kirito thought for a moment before answering. "That was a long time ago, before we were as good of friends as we are now." The person raised an eyebrow. "Save it? You were avoiding me back then. I asked you to hang out tons of times, and you always said no. Not even for a cup of tea." Kirito started to get defensive. Well, is just really busy. Okay? But the person wasn't buying it. "Yes, you were avoiding me, admit it." Kirito tried to change the subject. "Let's not focus on that right now. The point is," he hoped to steer the conversation in a different direction, but it was clear things were getting awkward. "I tried to climb the rock, but it didn't exactly go as planned. The rock had lots of nooks and crannies that made it pretty easy to find hand and footholds. But about 80 yards up, a loud voice suddenly yelled at me. It said I was in an off-limits area. My friend thought it was hilarious. Haha, you can't cheat." They laughed. But I wasn't amused. The surprise made me lose my grip, and I fell off the rock. My friend's smile quickly faded. "Wait, what?" they exclaimed, suddenly worried. "That fall would have been a killer. I totally thought I was a goner. If I had grabbed my teleport crystal just a few seconds later, I'd be history." "Whoa, that's crazy scary. Don't ever try something that reckless again." "Hey, you're the one who came up with the idea in the first place." As they kept talking, the trees seemed to close in around them, and the forest grew denser. The birdsong was getting quieter and the sunlight filtering through the trees seemed dimmer than before. Asuna looked around, feeling a bit unsure. "So where are we supposed to be going again?" she asked Kirito. He pulled out their map and took a closer look. "We're almost there," he said with a nod. "Just a few more minutes." Asuna's curiosity got the better of her. "What did the story say happened here?" she asked, even though part of her didn't want to know. The unknown was making her nervous. Kirito filled her in. About a week ago, a player who's really good at woodcrafting came to this area to collect some timber. Imagine being in a forest with super cool trees that produce amazing wood. A guy was so into his work that he lost track of time. When he finally turned to head home, he saw something white dark behind a nearby tree. This already had Asuna freaked out, but Kirito just kept going. He thought he saw a monster at first, and totally panicked, but it turned out he was wrong.